The moment my father raised his champagne flute and declared to David's incredible promotion at Summit Tech Solutions, I nearly choked on my glazed ham. My brother beamed as our entire extended family erupted in applause, completely unaware that they were celebrating his advancement at the company I had secretly founded and owned for the past 3 years. The irony was so thick you could cut it with the carving knife still sitting beside the Easter roast. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Marcus Chen, and at 29 years old I've become accustomed to being the family disappointment. Not because I've failed at life, but because in my family's eyes I've never measured up to my younger brother David. Growing up in Cedar Park, a quiet suburb outside Austin, Texas, our household operated on a simple principle that David could do no wrong, while I seemed incapable of doing anything right. David, 3 years my junior, had always been the golden child. Where I was introverted and spent hours tinkering with computers in my bedroom, David was outgoing and charismatic, the kind of kid who made friends effortlessly and charmed teachers without trying. Our mother Linda, a successful real estate agent who thrived on social connections, naturally gravitated toward David's magnetic personality. Our father Robert, a recently retired bank manager who valued traditional success markers, saw David as the son who would carry forward the family legacy of respectability and achievement. My childhood was spent watching David receive standing ovations for mediocre school performances, while my straight A's were met with casual nods and expectations of continued excellence. When David barely scraped through high school with a C average, our parents threw him a graduation party that rivaled some weddings I've attended. When I graduated as valedictorian 2 years earlier, my father's response was a handshake and a comment about how he expected nothing less from someone who spent all their time studying instead of developing social skills. The pattern continued through college. David chose to attend the University of Texas at Austin, majoring in business administration, a decision our parents praised as practical and forward-thinking. I had received a full scholarship to MIT for computer science, but somehow my acceptance letter was met with concerns about me moving so far from home and warnings about becoming too academic for my own good. Even my graduation from MIT with honors was overshadowed by David's completion of his bachelor's degree, which our parents celebrated as though he had achieved something extraordinary rather than simply meeting basic expectations. After college, I returned to Austin and made what appeared to be a series of questionable life choices. I moved into a modest downtown loft and told my family I was pursuing freelance web design. They watched with barely concealed disapproval as I turned down traditional corporate opportunities that they felt would provide stability and respectability. David, meanwhile, jumped from one entry-level position to another, each job change celebrated by our parents as evidence of his ambition and marketability. What my family didn't know was that my freelance web design work was merely a cover story. 3 years ago, I had founded Summit Tech Solutions, a software development and IT consulting company that had grown from my one-bedroom apartment operation into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I had deliberately kept my business ownership secret, allowing them to believe I was struggling as a freelancer while I built something extraordinary. The decision to hide my success hadn't been born out of modesty or humility. It had been a strategic choice based on years of observing how my family operated. Every achievement I had ever earned had been minimized, explained away, or overshadowed by David's lesser accomplishments. I knew that revealing my business success would somehow be twisted into a narrative that diminished David's achievements, or worse yet, my parents would find ways to credit David with inspiring my success or providing the family foundation that made it possible. Summit Tech Solutions had grown beyond my wildest expectations. What started as custom software development for small businesses had expanded into enterprise-level consulting and innovative tech solutions for major corporations across Texas and beyond. I employed over 40 people across 3 offices, with our main headquarters occupying 2 floors of a prestigious downtown Austin building. The company generated revenue that would have shocked my family, but I maintained my cover by living modestly and continuing to present myself as a struggling freelancer who occasionally landed decent contracts. 6 months ago, David had been hired by Summit Tech Solutions as a junior account coordinator. The hiring decision had been made by Jennifer Walsh, the CEO I had recruited to handle day-to-day operations while I remained as the silent owner and founder. Jennifer knew my identity, but to the rest of the company, I was simply an anonymous investor who preferred to remain behind the scenes. David had no idea he was working for his older brother's company. When David announced his new job at Summit Tech Solutions, our parents had been ecstatic. Finally, their youngest son was working for a reputable growing company with real potential for advancement. They praised his initiative in landing such a coveted position and spoke proudly to friends and neighbors about David's promising career in the tech industry. I sat through dinner after dinner listening to them discuss David's bright future at Summit Tech while I nodded along and pretended to share their enthusiasm. The cruel irony was that David was actually quite good at his job. Despite his lack of technical background, he had a natural ability to connect with clients and understand their needs. His department head, Kevin Thompson, had specifically mentioned David's potential during our monthly executive briefings. David's charm and communication skills, the same qualities that had made him our parents' favorite, were genuinely valuable assets in client relations. Over the past 6 months, I had watched David thrive in an environment where his strengths were recognized and utilized. He had no idea that his success was occurring within a company built by the brother our family had written off as an underachiever. The promotion he was celebrating today was real and deserved, based entirely on his own merit and performance. Jennifer Walsh had recommended him for advancement to senior account coordinator after he had successfully managed several challenging client relationships and brought in new business. Easter Sunday arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that makes Texas beautiful. My parents had invited the extended family for their traditional Easter dinner, a gathering that typically included my father's brother Uncle Tom and his wife Aunt Carol, my mother's sister Aunt Patricia who lived next door, and assorted cousins and family friends. These gatherings were always exercises in family mythology where David's accomplishments were recounted and celebrated while my presence was acknowledged with polite but distant interest. I had considered skipping the dinner entirely, as I had done with several family gatherings over the past year. The charade of pretending to be a struggling freelancer while listening to my family's disappointment in my life choices had become increasingly difficult to maintain. But something had compelled me to attend this particular gathering, perhaps a subconscious desire to witness the ultimate irony of my situation. I arrived at my childhood home carrying a bottle of wine and the same guarded optimism that I brought to every family gathering, hoping that perhaps this time the conversation would focus on something other than David's superiority and my perceived failures. The house looked exactly as it had throughout my childhood, with my mother's carefully maintained garden blooming with spring flowers and the same family photos covering every available surface in the living room. David was already there when I arrived, animated and excited in a way that immediately.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Caught my attention. He was dressed in a sharp navy suit that I recognized as expensive, definitely beyond what his current salary should have afforded. Sarah Mitchell, his girlfriend of 8 months, stood beside him looking equally polished and pleased. Sarah worked as a marketing coordinator for a local advertising firm and had quickly become another favorite among my family members, who saw her as evidence of David's excellent judgment and bright future. The dining room had been set with my mother's finest china and crystal, the kind of formal presentation typically reserved for major celebrations. Fresh flowers adorned the table, and the smell of honey-glazed ham filled the air along with side dishes that represented hours of careful preparation. My mother had clearly gone to considerable effort to make this Easter dinner special, though I hadn't yet understood why this particular gathering warranted such elaborate treatment. As we gathered around the table, my father cleared his throat in the way he always did when preparing to make an important announcement. The family fell silent, forks suspended over their plates, attention focused on the patriarch who clearly had something significant to share. Before we begin this wonderful meal that Linda has prepared, my father began, his voice carrying the formal tone he used for important pronouncements. I want to take a moment to acknowledge something very special that has happened in our family. David's face was already flushing with pleasure, and I could see Sarah squeezing his hand beneath the table. Whatever announcement was coming, they were clearly in on it and eagerly anticipating the family's reaction. As you all know, my father continued, David has been working hard at Summit Tech Solutions for the past 6 months. What you may not know is that his dedication and exceptional performance have been recognized by his superiors. My stomach began to tighten as I realized where this announcement was heading. Around the table, cousins and aunts leaned forward with interest, while my mother beamed with the kind of pride I had rarely seen directed toward any of my achievements. David has been promoted to senior account coordinator, my father declared, his voice rising with enthusiasm. At only 26 years old, he's already advancing in one of Austin's most prestigious tech companies. This promotion comes with a significant salary increase and puts him on the fast track for management. The table erupted in applause and congratulations. Uncle Tom clapped David on the shoulder while Aunt Carol and Aunt Patricia offered excited praise for his achievement. Sarah accepted congratulations as though she had personally contributed to David's success, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with emotions that seemed excessive for what was objectively a fairly standard workplace promotion. "I'm so proud of the man you've become," my father continued, raising his champagne flute. "Your work ethic, your interpersonal skills, your ability to excel in a competitive environment, these are the qualities that will take you far in life." As glasses clinked around the table and family members offered toasts to David's bright future, I sat in stunned silence, processing the surreal nature of the moment. My family was celebrating my brother's advancement within the company I had built from nothing, treating it as validation of superior character traits and family values that had somehow bypassed me entirely. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in family mythology construction. David modestly described his responsibilities and achievements at Summit Tech Solutions while family members marveled at his success and drew connections between his promotion and the values our parents had instilled in him. No one asked about my work or expressed any curiosity about how my freelance career was progressing. I was simply expected to sit quietly and add my congratulations to the chorus of family approval. Summit Tech Solutions is really making a name for itself in the Austin business community, Uncle Tom observed, cutting into his ham with appreciation. "I've heard nothing but good things about their innovation and client service. David, you've really positioned yourself well for the future." David nodded with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his own potential for success. "The company culture is incredible," he said enthusiastically. "The leadership really invests in employee development and creates opportunities for growth. I feel lucky to be part of such a forward-thinking organization." Listening to David praise the company culture I had deliberately cultivated was both gratifying and deeply ironic. Every policy he was crediting for his success, the mentorship programs, the performance-based advancement opportunities, the emphasis on work-life balance, had been my initiative, implemented through Jennifer Walsh, but originating from my vision of what a healthy workplace should look like. "What exactly does a senior account coordinator do?" Aunt Patricia asked, genuinely interested in David's responsibilities. David launched into a detailed explanation of client relationship management, project coordination, and business development that demonstrated he genuinely understood his role and was good at it. His enthusiasm was infectious, and even I found myself impressed by his grasp of complex business concepts and his ability to articulate strategic thinking. "The best part," David continued, "is that I'm working directly with some major clients now. Last month I helped secure a contract with a Fortune 500 company that's going to bring in over $2 million in revenue for Summit Tech Solutions." I nearly dropped my fork. The Fortune 500 contract he was referring to was one I had personally negotiated through months of careful relationship building and strategic positioning. David had been assigned to the account after the deal was signed, but his client management had indeed been instrumental in expanding the scope of work and building a foundation for future contracts. $2 million, my father repeated with awe. "Son, you're really making an impact." The pride in my father's voice was unmistakable, the kind of unconditional admiration I had craved throughout my childhood and had never quite achieved. Here he was, celebrating David's contribution to my company's success with an enthusiasm that he had never shown for any of my actual achievements. "I have to say," my mother added, "we always knew David had special leadership qualities. Remember how he was student body president in high school, and how he could make friends with anyone? Those skills are really paying off now." As the family recounted David's childhood achievements and drew direct lines between his early promise and current success, I felt the familiar weight of being an afterthought in my own family's narrative. The difference now was that I knew the complete truth of the situation, which made their praise simultaneously more painful and more absurd. "Marcus," Aunt Carol said suddenly, turning her attention to me for the first time during the meal. "How is your computer work going? Are you getting enough clients to stay busy?" The question was asked with the kind of polite interest typically reserved for discussing someone's struggling hobby rather than their career. Around the table, conversation paused as family members waited for my response, though their attention seemed more obligatory than genuine. "It's going well," I replied carefully. "I'm staying busy with various projects." "That's good," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It must be nice to have that flexibility, even if it's not as stable as a traditional job like David's." The comparison was subtle but unmistakable, reinforcing the family hierarchy where David's conventional success was inherently superior to my unconventional path. What made the comment particularly galling was that my various projects generated more revenue in a month than David's impressive new salary would bring in over an entire year. Actually, Sarah chimed in. David was telling me that Summit Tech Solutions sometimes works with freelance developers for overflow projects. Maybe you could apply for some contract work there, Marcus. David might be able to put in a good word for you. The suggestion that my little brother might help me land freelance work at my own company was so absurd that I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. The sincerity in Sarah's voice made it clear that she genuinely thought she was offering helpful career advice to David's underachieving older brother. That's a great idea, my mother said eagerly. David, do you think there might be opportunities for Marcus at your company? David considered the question seriously, his expression thoughtful as he weighed whether his newly elevated position might allow him to assist his struggling brother. I could definitely mention Marcus to Jennifer Walsh, our CEO, he said generously. She's always looking for talented developers, and if Marcus has a good portfolio, there might be project-based work available. The offer was made with genuine kindness, which somehow made it even more surreal. David was volunteering to recommend me for freelance work to the CEO I had hired, at the company I owned, based on his 6 months of experience as an employee in an organization I had built from the ground up. That would be wonderful, my father said, his enthusiasm for the idea evident. It would be good for Marcus to get some experience with a real company instead of just working with small clients. As my family discussed the possibility of David helping me advance my career through his connections at Summit Tech Solutions, I realized that the irony of my situation had reached a level that bordered on the absurd. Not only were they celebrating David's success within my company, but they were now actively planning how he might leverage his position to throw me some freelance crumbs. The conversation about David potentially helping me secure freelance work at Summit Tech Solutions continued throughout the remainder of dinner, with each family member contributing suggestions about how I might leverage this opportunity to finally achieve some measure of professional stability. My mother suggested I update my portfolio to showcase more corporate-friendly designs, while Uncle Tom recommended that I consider the networking potential of working with an established company like Summit Tech Solutions. The key is building relationships, Uncle Tom advised, gesturing with his fork for emphasis. In business, it's not just what you know, it's who you know. David could be your foot in the door to a whole new level of clients. Aunt Carol nodded enthusiastically. And once you prove yourself on a few projects, who knows? Maybe they'll offer you a full-time position. Stability is so important, especially as you get older and start thinking about settling down. The implication that I needed to settle down and achieve stability through traditional employment was a familiar refrain in family conversations about my career. What they couldn't possibly understand was that I had already achieved more financial stability and professional success than any of them could imagine. My company's quarterly profits exceeded what most people made in several years, and I owned assets that would have shocked them into silence. David warmed to his role as potential benefactor, discussing the company's project timelines and upcoming initiatives with the authority of someone who had quickly grasped the business model and growth trajectory. His insights were actually quite accurate, demonstrating that he genuinely understood the industry and had been paying attention during meetings and strategy sessions. We're expanding into cybersecurity consulting next quarter, David explained, and there's definitely going to be increased demand for specialized development work. Marcus, if you have any experience with security protocols or encryption, that could be a real advantage. I did in fact have extensive experience with cybersecurity, having personally overseen the development of several proprietary security solutions that had become key differentiators for Summit Tech Solutions in the marketplace. The cybersecurity expansion David was describing had been my strategic initiative, planned and budgeted over the past year as we positioned the company to capitalize on growing market demand. That sounds very promising, my father said, his tone suggesting that perhaps there was hope for his eldest son after all. Marcus, you should definitely pursue this opportunity. It could be exactly what you need to get your career on track. The phrase "get your career on track" stung with its implication that my professional life had somehow derailed or never properly begun. In reality, my career had exceeded every benchmark of success by any reasonable measure. I had built a company that employed dozens of people, generated millions in revenue, and was recognized as an innovative leader in the Austin tech community. The disconnect between reality and my family's perception of my situation was so vast that it felt like living in parallel universes. After dinner, as the family gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, David pulled out his phone to show everyone photos from a recent company event. The images showed Summit Tech Solutions' annual team-building retreat, an expensive weekend at a luxury resort in the Hill Country that I had personally approved as part of our employee engagement budget. "This is Jennifer Walsh, our CEO," David said, pointing to a photo of Jennifer giving a presentation. "She's incredible. Really visionary leadership and completely approachable.
She actually knows everyone's name and asks about their families. Jennifer Walsh was indeed exceptional, which was why I had recruited her from a Fortune 500 company 2 years ago, with a compensation package that made her one of the highest paid executives in Austin's tech sector. Every leadership quality David was praising had been evident during my extensive interview process, and her management style reflected the company culture I had specifically requested she cultivate. Here's our office space, David continued, swiping to photos of Summit Tech Solutions headquarters. We have 3 floors in one of downtown Austin's premium buildings. Game room, fully stocked kitchen, standing desks, ergonomic chairs. The company really invests in creating an environment where people want to work. The office amenities David was showcasing represented hundreds of thousands of dollars in infrastructure investment that I had personally approved. Every detail from the custom lighting to the collaborative workspaces had been designed according to specifications I had researched and developed. Watching my family admire the workplace I had created while discussing how David might help me find work there was surreal beyond description. David, you've really landed in an amazing situation, Aunt Patricia observed. Companies like that don't just hire anyone. They must have seen something special in you during the interview process. David's interview had indeed gone well, but what Aunt Patricia didn't know was that I had been watching the entire process through the conference room's video system. Jennifer Walsh had been impressed by David's communication skills and client service potential, but the final hiring decision had required my approval as the company owner. I had wrestled with the ethics of hiring my own brother without his knowledge, ultimately deciding that his qualifications genuinely warranted the position. The interview was pretty intensive, David admitted. Multiple rounds with different departments, case study presentations, cultural fit assessments. But once I got there and saw the environment, I knew I wanted to be part of it. Sarah squeezed David's hand affectionately. He prepared for weeks. I helped him research the company history and practice his presentation. Summit Tech Solutions has such an impressive track record of innovation and growth. She was absolutely right about the company's track record, though she had no way of knowing that the innovation and growth she was praising had been driven by strategic decisions I had made since founding the company. Every major milestone David had discovered during his research represented months or years of my work building something from nothing. As the evening progressed, conversation naturally shifted to David's future prospects and career trajectory. The family discussed his potential for advancement within Summit Tech Solutions with the kind of detailed analysis typically reserved for discussing celebrity careers or major sporting events. Every aspect of his professional development was examined and celebrated, from his expanding client portfolio to his increasing responsibilities in project management. The best part, David explained, is that Summit Tech Solutions promotes from within. Jennifer Walsh started as a department manager at her previous company and worked her way up to CEO. She's very committed to helping employees develop their potential and advance based on performance rather than politics. This was absolutely true, and it reflected the meritocratic culture I had specifically requested Jennifer implement. I had been frustrated by corporate environments where advancement depended more on networking and favoritism than actual competence, and I had insisted that Summit Tech Solutions operate differently. David's promotion to Senior Account Coordinator was legitimate recognition of his abilities and contributions. That's the kind of company culture that builds long-term success, my father observed approvingly. David, you've positioned yourself very well for the future. Uncle Tom nodded in agreement. In today's economy, finding an employer who actually invests in employee development is rare. You've got to hold on to opportunities like this. What none of them realized was that the employer who invested in employee development was sitting quietly in the corner, listening to them praise the business philosophy and management approach I had spent years developing and implementing. Every policy they were admiring had been my decision. Every benefit they were celebrating had been my investment in creating the kind of workplace I believed people deserved. The conversation eventually turned to David's personal life and future plans with Sarah. The promotion at Summit Tech Solutions had apparently given him the financial confidence to start thinking about major life decisions, including the possibility of purchasing a home and eventually proposing marriage. The salary increase is substantial enough that we can start looking at houses in some of the nicer neighborhoods, David explained to the gathered family. Sarah and I have been talking about starting to build some real equity instead of just paying rent. Sarah blushed prettily as family members offered advice about home ownership and mortgage strategies. My mother immediately launched into real estate agent mode, discussing market conditions and neighborhood comparisons with professional enthusiasm. The prospect of David achieving
Traditional markers of adult success, property ownership, marriage, family was clearly thrilling to parents who had worried about whether their youngest son would fulfill their expectations. Have you started looking at specific areas? My mother asked, already mentally calculating commission possibilities. We're interested in the Mueller development, Sarah replied. It's close to downtown but still has that neighborhood feel. Plus the schools are supposed to be excellent for when we start thinking about children. Mueller was indeed one of Austin's most desirable planned communities, with home prices that reflected its premium location and amenities. David's new salary at Summit Tech Solutions would make such a purchase feasible, though it would represent a significant financial commitment that demonstrated real confidence in his career trajectory. Mueller is a smart choice, Uncle Tom agreed. Property values there have been appreciating steadily, and the community planning is top-notch. You'll be making a solid investment. As the family discussed David and Sarah's house hunting plans, I reflected on the strange mathematics of the situation. David's promotion had indeed provided him with enough financial security to make major life decisions, but that security ultimately derived from the success of the company I had built. His salary increases, his career advancement, his growing confidence about the future all traced back to business decisions I had made as Summit Tech Solutions owner and founder. The evening was drawing to a close when David's phone buzzed with what appeared to be a work-related message. He glanced at the screen and smiled with the satisfaction of someone who enjoyed being connected to important business communications even during family time. Jennifer Walsh, he explained to the table. She's sending congratulations on the promotion and some preliminary information about my new responsibilities. David read the message silently, his expression growing increasingly pleased as he absorbed whatever details Jennifer had shared. The family waited expectantly for him to summarize the communication, clearly eager to hear more details about his expanding role within Summit Tech Solutions. This is incredible, David said, looking up from his phone with genuine excitement. Jennifer wants me to start working directly with our biggest client accounts. She's assigning me to the Morrison Industries project, which is our largest contract. Morrison Industries was indeed Summit Tech Solutions' most significant client relationship, a multi-year agreement worth over $15 million that involved comprehensive IT infrastructure overhaul and ongoing consulting services. I had personally negotiated that contract over 6 months of presentations and relationship building, and it represented nearly 30% of our current annual revenue. $15 million, David continued, his voice filled with awe. I'm going to be the primary point of contact for a $15 million account. The family's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. This level of responsibility clearly exceeded their expectations for David's career progression, and the dollar amount was large enough to impress even Uncle Tom, who had spent his career in finance and was accustomed to discussing significant sums. David, that's extraordinary, my father said, his pride evident in every word. At 26 years old, to be trusted with that level of responsibility, it says everything about your potential and the impression you've made at Summit Tech Solutions. What my father didn't know was that I had specifically requested Jennifer assign David to the Morrison Industries account. Not because of family favoritism, but because his client relationship skills were genuinely well suited to Morrison's corporate culture and communication preferences. The assignment was based on strategic considerations about personality fit and account management effectiveness. Jennifer says that Morrison Industries specifically requested continuity in their account management, David explained, reading from his phone. They want to work with someone who can grow with their business and understand their long-term objectives. This was accurate. Morrison Industries had indeed expressed preferences about account management consistency, and David's interpersonal skills had made a positive impression during his previous interactions with their team. The assignment represented both recognition of his abilities and a significant vote of confidence in his potential for handling complex client relationships. As David shared more details about his new responsibilities, I found myself in the surreal position of listening to my brother describe opportunities I had created for him while my family marveled at his good fortune and professional acumen. Every aspect of his success within Summit Tech Solutions could be traced directly to decisions I had made as the company's owner, yet I remained invisible in the narrative of his achievement. The conversation was interrupted by a phone call that my father answered with his characteristic formal telephone manner. After a brief conversation filled with "yes" and "that's wonderful" responses, he hung up and turned to address the family with obvious excitement. That was Bill Henderson from the Cedar Park Business Association, my father announced. He wants to feature David in their monthly newsletter as an example of local young professionals making their mark in Austin's tech industry. This recognition represented another level of validation for David's career success, extending beyond family pride into community acknowledgement. The Cedar Park Business Association was a respected organization that my father had been involved with for years, and their newsletter reached several thousand local business owners and professionals. They want to do a full interview about your career path and your role at Summit Tech Solutions, my father continued, his satisfaction evident. Bill said they're particularly interested in highlighting how David represents the next generation of tech leadership in the Austin area. David looked both pleased and slightly overwhelmed by this unexpected recognition. The prospect of being featured as a representative of young tech professionals was clearly beyond what he had imagined when he started working at Summit Tech Solutions 6 months earlier. That's incredible, Sarah said, squeezing David's hand. You're going to be in print as a success story. The irony was almost too much to bear. David was going to be interviewed and featured as an example of tech industry success based on his role at the company I had founded and built. The article would celebrate his achievements without any awareness that his employer was his older brother, sitting quietly in the same room and listening to plans for the interview. They want to schedule the interview for next week, my father added. Bill mentioned that Summit Tech Solutions has been getting a lot of positive attention lately for their innovative projects and company culture. Summit Tech Solutions had indeed been receiving recognition in Austin business circles, including recent articles in the Austin Business Journal and Austin American Statesman. The company's growth trajectory and reputation for innovation had attracted attention from industry analysts and business reporters who covered the local tech scene. I'll need to prepare thoroughly for that interview, David said, his expression growing serious as he contemplated the responsibility of representing both himself and Summit Tech Solutions in a public forum. I want to make sure I represent the company well. His concern about properly representing Summit Tech Solutions demonstrated the genuine loyalty and professionalism he had developed during his time with the company. David had clearly internalized the company's values and culture in ways that went beyond mere job performance, embracing his role as an ambassador for the organization. As the family began discussing interview strategies and key points David should emphasize, I realized that my situation had evolved beyond simple irony into something approaching the absurd. Not only was I listening to my family celebrate David's success at my company, but I was now hearing them plan how he would publicly represent the business I had built as an example of his own professional achievement. The evening finally concluded with rounds of congratulations and discussions about future family gatherings, where David could update everyone on his continued progress at Summit Tech Solutions. As relatives prepared to leave, each made a point of emphasizing how proud they were of David's accomplishments and how excited they were to see what he would achieve next. Marcus' Aunt Carol said as she gathered her purse, "Make sure you follow up with David about those freelance opportunities at Summit Tech Solutions. A connection like that could really help you establish yourself professionally." Her well-meaning advice was delivered with the sincere concern of someone who genuinely wanted to help a struggling family member find stability and success. The fact that she was suggesting I seek employment at my own company through my brother's influence would have been funny if it weren't so painfully representative of how completely my family misunderstood my actual circumstances. "I definitely will," I replied, maintaining the pretense that had become second nature over the past 3 years. As I drove home through the quiet streets of Cedar Park, I reflected on the extraordinary evening I had just experienced. In the span of a few hours, I had listened to my family celebrate my brother's promotion at my company, discuss how he might help me find work there, and plan his media interview as a representative of tech industry success. The level of irony had reached proportions that seemed almost scripted for dramatic effect. Back in my downtown loft, I poured myself a scotch and sat by the window overlooking the Austin skyline. Somewhere in that collection of buildings was Summit Tech Solutions headquarters, where David would return tomorrow morning to begin his expanded responsibilities
managing the Morrison Industries account.
He would work diligently to exceed client expectations and build relationships that would benefit the company I had created, all while completely unaware that his success was occurring within an organization built by the brother his family considered a professional disappointment. The weight of maintaining this deception was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. Every family gathering brought new layers of irony and misunderstanding, each more surreal than the last. David's genuine success and growing confidence made the situation more complex, not less so, because his achievements were real and deserved recognition, even as the context remained hidden from everyone involved. I had created Summit Tech Solutions with the intention of building something meaningful and successful, but I had never anticipated that my own brother would become one of its rising stars, celebrated by our family as evidence of superior character and potential. The success I had worked years to achieve was being attributed to David's exceptional qualities, while my actual accomplishments remained invisible and unacknowledged. As I finished my drink and prepared for bed, I wondered how long I could maintain this elaborate deception, and what would happen when the truth eventually emerged. The foundation of lies and misunderstanding that supported my family's perception of reality was becoming increasingly unstable, and I sensed that major revelations were inevitable. The weeks following Easter dinner brought an unexpected acceleration in David's career trajectory at Summit Tech Solutions that even I hadn't fully anticipated. Through Jennifer Walsh's weekly executive reports, I learned that David had not only met the initial expectations for the Morrison Industries account, but had exceeded them in ways that surprised even our most optimistic projections. His natural ability to understand client needs and translate technical solutions into business benefits had impressed Morrison's executive team to the degree that they were requesting expanded consulting services beyond our original contract scope. What made David's success particularly notable was his approach to client relationship management. Unlike many account coordinators who focus primarily on maintaining existing agreements, David had demonstrated an entrepreneurial instinct for identifying additional opportunities within client organizations. During his first month managing the Morrison Industries relationship, he had discovered inefficiencies in their supply chain management system that Summit Tech Solutions could address through custom software development, potentially adding another $3 million to our annual revenue from that single client. Jennifer Walsh had specifically mentioned David's performance during our confidential monthly owner briefings, describing him as a natural relationship builder with instincts for business development that were rare among junior staff members. She had recommended accelerating his advancement timeline and considering him for leadership development programs typically reserved for employees with significantly more experience. The professional recognition David was receiving created an interesting dynamic for me as both his employer and his brother. On one hand, his success reflected well on Summit Tech Solutions' ability to identify and develop talent, validating the hiring and training systems I had worked to establish. On the other hand, watching him excel in an environment I had created while remaining completely unaware of my role in his opportunities was becoming emotionally complex in ways I hadn't expected. My parents had begun incorporating updates about David's professional achievements into every family conversation, treating his career progress like an ongoing success story that validated their parenting philosophy and family values.
Yes.
During our weekly Sunday phone calls, my mother would spend significant portions of our conversations detailing David's latest accomplishments at Summit Tech Solutions, often with information that was more current than what I received through official company channels. David closed another major deal this week, my mother announced during one of these calls, her voice filled with the kind of pride typically reserved for discussing Nobel Prize winners or Olympic athletes. Sarah told me that Summit Tech Solutions is considering him for some kind of leadership training program. Can you imagine? After only 7 months with the company. The leadership training program my mother was referencing was Summit Tech Solutions' Executive Development Initiative, an expensive and selective program I had established to identify and cultivate high-potential employees for senior management roles. David's nomination for the program represented Jennifer Walsh's confidence in his long-term potential, and her belief that he could eventually assume significant leadership responsibilities within the organization. That's quite an achievement, I replied, maintaining the tone of supportive older brother, while internally processing the irony of discussing my employee development programs, as though they were external opportunities that David had somehow earned through exceptional merit. Your father is so proud, my mother continued. He's been telling everyone at the country club about David's success. Bill Henderson from the Business Association says the newsletter article featuring David has generated more positive response than any profile they've published this year. The newsletter article had indeed been well received within Cedar Park's business community, positioning David as a representative of young professional success in Austin's growing tech sector. The article had included a photograph of David in Summit Tech Solutions' conference room, along with quotes about innovation, client service and career development that presented him as an articulate spokesperson for the next generation of business leaders. What my parents didn't know was that I had quietly arranged for additional copies of the newsletter to be distributed through Summit Tech Solutions' marketing channels, helping to amplify the positive publicity for both David and the company. The article served dual purposes, recognizing David's legitimate achievements while generating favorable media coverage for Summit Tech Solutions within the local business community. Has David mentioned anything about helping you connect with opportunities at Summit Tech Solutions?
My mother asked, shifting the conversation toward her ongoing concern about my career trajectory. It seems like such a perfect fit for your technical skills. This question had become a regular feature of our phone conversations, with my mother expressing increasing urgency about my need to leverage David's position for professional advancement. Her concern was genuine and well-intentioned, based on her perception that I was struggling as a freelance web designer while my younger brother flourished in corporate environment that could potentially offer me stability and growth opportunities. We've discussed it briefly, I answered, which was technically true, though our discussions had been limited to David's generous offers to introduce me to Jennifer Walsh for potential contract work. I'm waiting for the right project opportunity to present itself. My mother's relief at this response was audible. That's smart. You don't want to rush into something that isn't a good fit. But David really could be your gateway to a whole new level of professional success. The idea that David could serve as my gateway to professional success at the company I owned and operated was so absurd that I sometimes wondered if I was living in an elaborate practical joke designed by the universe to test my tolerance for irony. Every conversation with my family reinforced their fundamental misunderstanding of my actual circumstances while deepening my appreciation for the complex situation I had created through years of careful deception. My relationship with Tyler Rodriguez, my best friend, and the only person who knew the truth about Summit Tech Solutions, provided necessary perspective during this increasingly surreal period. Tyler, who worked as a senior accountant at a major Austin firm, had been my confidant throughout the process of building the company, and had helped me establish the financial structures that allowed me to maintain my anonymity as owner. This has got to be driving you insane, Tyler observed during one of our regular coffee meetings at a downtown cafe. Listening to your family talk about David's success at your own company while they're planning how he can help you get freelance work there. Tyler's directness was one of the qualities I valued most about our friendship. Unlike my family members, who approach topics with layers of subtext and implication, Tyler addressed situations with straightforward honesty that cut through emotional complexity to focus on practical realities. It's definitely surreal, I admitted. But David genuinely deserves the recognition he's getting. His performance has been excellent, and he's contributing real value to the company. That's not the point, Tyler replied firmly. The point is that your family has spent your entire life treating you like you're somehow deficient compared to David, and now they're celebrating his success at the company you built, while suggesting you need his help to achieve basic professional stability. Tyler's analysis was accurate, but uncomfortable. The emotional patterns that had defined my family relationships since childhood were being amplified and complicated by the current situation in ways that made objective evaluation difficult. David's success was simultaneously validating and frustrating, representing both confirmation of Summit Tech Solutions' positive work environment and continuation of family dynamics that had always made me feel invisible. What's your endgame here? Tyler asked. You can't maintain this deception indefinitely. Eventually something is going to force the truth into the open. This was the question I had been avoiding for months. When I first established Summit Tech Solutions and chose to keep my ownership secret, I had imagined that the deception would be temporary, lasting only until the company was established and profitable. But as the business grew and succeeded beyond my initial projections, the lie had become increasingly complex and difficult to unwind. I'm not sure, I answered honestly. Part of me is curious to see how far this can go. How long my family can celebrate David's achievements at my company without anyone making the connection. Tyler shook his head with a mixture of amusement and concern. Marcus, this isn't a social experiment. This is your life and your family relationships. Eventually this is going to explode in ways that hurt everyone involved. His warning was prescient, though I didn't fully appreciate it at the time. The foundation of lies and misunderstanding that supported my family's perception of reality was becoming increasingly unstable, and external pressures were beginning to create situations that would make continued deception practically impossible. The first sign of potential complications emerged when David began expressing interest in Summit Tech Solutions' ownership structure and long-term strategic planning. During family dinners, he had started asking sophisticated questions about the company's financial backing, expansion plans, and decision-making processes that demonstrated both genuine curiosity about the business and growing confidence in his role within the organization. Jennifer Walsh mentioned that Summit Tech Solutions is privately owned, David told our parents during a Sunday dinner at their house. But she's been pretty discreet about the ownership details. I've been wondering about the investors, and whether there might be opportunities for employee equity participation. David's questions about ownership and equity were natural for an ambitious employee who was beginning to think strategically about his long-term career development. Summit Tech Solutions had indeed established an employee stock option program that I had designed to reward high-performing team members with ownership stakes in the company's future success. That's smart thinking, my father approved. Understanding the business structure and ownership incentives shows real strategic awareness. Have you asked Jennifer about the equity program? I'm planning to bring it up during my next performance review, David replied. If Summit Tech Solutions offers stock options or profit sharing, I want to make sure I'm positioned to take advantage of those opportunities. What David didn't know was that he was already eligible for the equity program based on his performance ratings and Jennifer Walsh's recommendations. As the company owner, I had personally approved his inclusion in the next round of stock option grants, which would give him a meaningful financial stake in Summit Tech Solutions' continued growth and success. The prospect of David becoming a partial owner of my company added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. His equity participation would be legitimate and deserved, based entirely on his contributions and potential, but it would also make him a beneficiary of business decisions I made as the primary owner and founder. Stock options could be incredibly valuable if Summit Tech Solutions continues growing at its current pace, Sarah observed, demonstrating her own understanding of equity compensation and long-term wealth-building strategies. Tech companies that offer employee ownership often see better performance and loyalty from their teams. Sarah's analysis was correct, and it reflected the reasoning behind my decision to establish the equity program. I had wanted Summit Tech Solutions to be the kind of company where talented employees could build significant wealth through their contributions to organizational success, rather than simply earning salaries while ownership benefits accrued exclusively to external investors. David, you should definitely pursue that conversation with Jennifer, my mother encouraged. If there are ownership opportunities available, you want to make sure you're considered for them. As my family discussed David's potential equity participation in Summit Tech Solutions, I found myself in the bizarre position of listening to them strategize about his financial future within the company I owned. Their advice was sound and their enthusiasm was genuine, but their lack of awareness about my role in creating these opportunities made the conversation feel like an elaborate performance where I was simultaneously the audience and the unseen playwright. The equity discussion led to broader conversations about David's career trajectory and long-term goals within Summit Tech Solutions. He had clearly been thinking strategically about his professional development and had identified specific areas where he wanted to expand his skills and responsibilities. I've been talking with Jennifer about potentially moving into business development, David explained. The Morrison industry's success has opened up possibilities for working with larger enterprise clients, and I think I have the relationship skills to excel in that area. Business development was indeed one of Summit Tech Solutions' growth priorities, and David's instincts about his suitability for that role were accurate. Jennifer Walsh had specifically mentioned his potential for leading major client acquisitions during our recent strategic planning sessions. Business development could be incredibly lucrative, Uncle Tom observed, drawing on his financial services experience. If Summit Tech Solutions is growing as rapidly as it seems, the person responsible for bringing in new major clients could see substantial compensation increases. Uncle Tom was correct about the compensation potential for successful business development professionals in the tech industry. Summit Tech Solutions' commission structure for major account acquisition was indeed generous, designed to attract and retain top sales talent in a competitive market. The best part is that Jennifer seems committed to promoting from within, rather than hiring external candidates for senior positions. David continued, she's made it clear that strong performers can advance quickly if they demonstrate the right combination of skills and initiative. Jennifer's commitment to internal promotion reflected the organizational culture I had specifically requested when hiring her as CEO. I had wanted Summit Tech Solutions to be a company where talented employees could build substantial careers, rather than being forced to change companies to achieve advancement and recognition. As David outlined his professional aspirations within Summit Tech Solutions, I realized that his goals were entirely achievable, and that his career trajectory was likely to exceed even his current optimistic projections. The combination of his natural abilities, the company's growth trajectory, and the developmental opportunities I had built into the organizational structure created conditions where David could realistically achieve significant professional success and financial rewards. The conversation was interrupted by a
phone call that my father answered with his characteristic formal telephone greeting. After a brief conversation filled with expressions of surprise and pleasure, he hung up and turned to address the family with obvious excitement. That was Jennifer Walsh. my father announced, his voice filled with pride and amazement. She called to personally congratulate our family on David's exceptional performance and to discuss his potential participation in Summit Tech Solutions' Leadership Development Program. The idea that Jennifer Walsh would personally call my parents to discuss David's career development was both touching and professionally inappropriate in ways that made me uncomfortable. While I appreciated her enthusiasm for recognizing high-performing employees, direct communication with employees' families crossed boundaries that most companies maintain for good reasons. She wanted to make sure we understood what an exceptional employee David has become, my father continued, his satisfaction evident in every word. Jennifer said that David represents exactly the kind of talent and character that Summit Tech Solutions wants to build its future around. Jennifer's assessment was accurate, but her decision to share it directly with my parents suggested that she had perhaps become too invested in David's success in ways that went beyond normal managerial relationships. Her call was well-intentioned but created potential complications for maintaining professional boundaries within the organization. What did she say about the leadership program? David asked, his excitement barely contained. She said that Summit Tech Solutions is prepared to invest substantially in David's professional development, my father replied. Advanced training, mentorship opportunities, expanded responsibilities. She mentioned that the program typically leads to senior management positions within 2 to 3 years. The leadership development program was indeed designed to accelerate the advancement of high-potential employees into senior management roles. David's selection for the program represented both recognition of his current performance and confidence in his potential for handling significantly greater responsibilities within the organization. 2 to 3 years to senior management, my mother repeated, her voice filled with wonder. David, you could be running a major department at one of Austin's most successful tech companies before you're 30. The timeline my mother was describing was realistic based on Summit Tech Solutions' growth projections and organizational expansion plans. David's combination of client relationship skills, business development instincts, and leadership potential positioned him well for rapid advancement within the company's structure. As my family processed this unexpected communication from Jennifer Walsh, I found myself questioning whether her call had been appropriate or professional. While I appreciated her recognition of David's contributions, direct contact with employees' families created potential complications that most companies avoided for good reasons. The evening concluded with extensive discussion of David's expanding opportunities at Summit Tech Solutions and speculation about his potential for achieving senior leadership positions within the organization. Every aspect of his career trajectory was analyzed and celebrated, with family members offering advice about professional development strategies and long-term planning. Marcus, Aunt Patricia said as the family gathering was ending, you really should follow up with David about opportunities at Summit Tech Solutions. A company that invests this much in employee development would be an incredible place to build a career. Her suggestion that I pursue employment at my own company through David's influence had become a recurring theme in family conversations, representing their genuine concern for my professional welfare combined with complete misunderstanding of my actual circumstances. I'll definitely consider it, I replied, maintaining the pretense that had become fundamental to my family relationships. As I drove home through Austin's downtown streets, I reflected on the increasingly complex situation I had created through years of careful deception. David's legitimate success at Summit Tech Solutions was generating recognition and opportunities that extended far beyond what I had anticipated when I first hired him. His career trajectory was exceeding even optimistic projections, creating possibilities for advancement and leadership that would make him a significant figure within the organization I had built. The phone call from Jennifer Walsh represented a new level of external validation for David's achievements, but it also demonstrated how his success was beginning to attract attention that could potentially complicate my ability to maintain anonymity as the company owner. As Summit Tech Solutions continued growing and David's role within the organization expanded, the likelihood of accidental discovery or inadvertent revelation was increasing in ways that made continued deception increasingly risky. Back in my loft, I poured myself a drink and considered Tyler's earlier question about my endgame strategy. The truth was that I had no clear plan for resolving the deception or managing the eventual revelation of my identity as Summit Tech Solutions owner and founder. What had begun as a temporary strategy for avoiding family judgment had evolved into an elaborate construction of lies and misdirection that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The unraveling began on a Tuesday morning in late May when David burst into my downtown loft unannounced, his face flushed with excitement and carrying a manila folder thick with documents. I had been reviewing quarterly financial reports for Summit Tech Solutions when he knocked, and I quickly closed my laptop as I opened the door to find my brother practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "Marcus, you're not going to believe what just happened," David said, pushing past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. "I need to tell someone, and Sarah's at work, and I couldn't wait until tonight." His energy was infectious, and despite my apprehension about unexpected visits to my carefully maintained cover identity, I found myself genuinely curious about whatever had generated such excitement. David had been riding high on professional success for months, but this level of enthusiasm suggested something exceptional had occurred. "What's going on?" I asked, gesturing for him to sit on the couch while I tried to assess whether his visit posed any immediate threats to my secret identity. "Jennifer Walsh just offered me the position of Director of Business Development," David announced, his voice filled with disbelief and triumph. "Director Marcus, at 26 years old, I'm going to be running an entire department at one of Austin's fastest-growing tech companies." The promotion David was describing was indeed significant, representing a jump of several organizational levels that would make him one of Summit Tech Solutions' youngest senior managers. Jennifer Walsh had mentioned the possibility during our recent executive meetings, but I hadn't expected her to move so quickly on the recommendation. "That's incredible, David," I said, and I meant it genuinely. His advancement was based entirely on merit and performance, and the director position would give him substantial responsibility for driving Summit Tech Solutions' growth through major client acquisition. "The compensation package is beyond anything I imagined possible," David continued, pulling documents from his folder. "Base salary, performance bonuses, stock options, full benefits package. Marcus, this is going to change everything for Sarah and me." He spread the offer documents across my coffee table, and I found myself in the surreal position of reviewing employment terms I had personally approved while pretending to be seeing them for the first time. The compensation package was indeed generous, reflecting both David's value to the organization and Summit Tech Solutions' commitment to retaining top talent in a competitive market. "Look at this equity component," David said, pointing to a specific section of the contract. "If Summit Tech Solutions continues growing at its current rate, these stock options could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars within 5 years." The stock option grant David was referencing was substantial, designed to align his financial interests with the company's long-term success. As someone who would now be directly responsible for business development and revenue growth, his equity participation would provide powerful incentives for maximizing organizational performance. "This is life-changing money," David continued, his voice filled with wonder. "Sarah and I can buy that house in Mueller, start thinking seriously about marriage and family, build real wealth instead of just getting by paycheck to paycheck." Watching my brother process the magnitude of his professional advancement was both gratifying and emotionally complex. His success was legitimate and deserved, but it was occurring within the context of opportunities I had created while remaining completely invisible in his narrative of achievement. "There's something else," David said, his expression growing more serious. "Jennifer wants me to participate in a special project that could lead to even bigger opportunities. Summit Tech Solutions is considering a major expansion, possibly opening offices in Dallas and Houston. She thinks I could be instrumental in developing those markets." The expansion David was describing was indeed part of Summit Tech Solutions' strategic planning, representing my vision for establishing the company as a regional leader in enterprise software development and IT consulting. His potential role in market development was a natural extension of his business development responsibilities and client relationship expertise. "She also mentioned something interesting about the company's ownership structure," David continued, lowering his voice as though sharing confidential information. "Apparently, Summit Tech Solutions is owned by a single private investor who prefers to remain anonymous. Jennifer says this person is incredibly hands-on with strategic decisions but maintains complete privacy about their identity." My stomach tightened as David unknowingly described my role within the organization. Jennifer Walsh's discretion about my identity had been absolute, but her willingness to discuss ownership structure, even in general terms, created potential risks for maintaining my anonymity. "That's unusual," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice neutral while processing the implications of this conversation. "Jennifer thinks the owner might be someone prominent in Austin's business community who doesn't want the attention that comes with being publicly associated with a high-growth tech company," David explained. "Whoever it is has been incredibly smart about building the business and creating opportunities for employees." The irony of listening to David speculate about my identity while praising my business acumen was almost overwhelming. His analysis was accurate. The success of Summit Tech Solutions did reflect strategic decisions and cultural investments that had positioned the company for sustained growth and employee development. The mysterious owner angle actually makes the whole thing more exciting, David continued. I'm working for someone who clearly knows what they're doing, but chooses to operate behind the scenes. It suggests a level of sophistication and long-term thinking that you don't usually see in smaller companies. David's enthusiasm for working with an anonymous owner demonstrated how successfully I had crafted a professional identity that inspired confidence and loyalty without requiring personal visibility or recognition. His respect for my business judgment was genuine, even though he had no idea he was praising his older brother's strategic capabilities. There's actually something I wanted to ask you about, David said, his tone shifting slightly. Jennifer mentioned that Summit Tech Solutions occasionally works with freelance developers for specialized projects. She said if I knew any talented developers who might be interested in contract work, I should recommend them. The conversation was heading toward the exact scenario my family had been discussing for months, David offering to help me secure freelance work at my own company. The absurdity of the situation was beyond anything I could have imagined when I first established the elaborate deception. I immediately thought of you, David continued earnestly. Marcus, this could be exactly the opportunity you need to establish yourself with a major tech company. Your skills are perfect for the kind of custom development work Summit Tech Solutions handles. His offer was made with genuine brotherly concern and affection, motivated by his desire to help me achieve the professional stability and recognition that our family believed I was lacking. The sincerity of his intentions made the situation both touching and deeply uncomfortable. I could arrange a meeting with Jennifer Walsh, David offered. With my recommendation and your portfolio, I'm confident you could land significant contract work. Maybe even a pathway to full-time employment if things go well. The prospect of David arranging a job interview for me with the CEO I had hired to run my own company was so surreal that I wondered if I was experiencing some kind of elaborate dream or psychological break. The multiple layers of deception and misunderstanding had reached proportions that seemed to defy rational possibility. That's very generous of you to offer, I said carefully, buying time to process the implications and determine how to respond without revealing the truth or creating additional complications. Marcus, I'm serious about this, David said, leaning forward with intensity. Summit Tech Solutions is an incredible company with amazing growth potential. The owner has created something special, and being part of it could transform your career. His passionate advocacy for the company I had built was both validating and heartbreaking. David genuinely believed he was offering me access to extraordinary opportunities, unaware that every aspect of Summit Tech Solutions that he admired had been created by the brother sitting across from him. I can see why you're so enthusiastic about working there, I replied, still struggling to navigate the conversation without exposing my identity or disappointing his generous intentions. The company culture is unlike anything I've experienced, David continued. Everyone is treated with respect, there are real opportunities for advancement, and the owner has clearly invested in creating an environment where people can do their best work. Every aspect of Summit Tech Solutions that David was praising represented deliberate decisions I had made about organizational values and employee treatment. His appreciation for the company culture validated my belief that businesses could be both profitable and genuinely supportive of human potential. Think about it, David urged. This could be your chance to work with cutting-edge technology, major enterprise clients, and a team that values innovation and excellence. Plus, the financial opportunities could be substantial if you prove yourself. The financial opportunities David was describing were indeed significant, though not in the way he imagined. As the owner of Summit Tech Solutions, my wealth had grown substantially beyond what any freelance or employment arrangement could provide, but David's offer represented his genuine desire to help me achieve prosperity and professional fulfillment. Before I could formulate a response to David's job offer, my phone rang with a call from Jennifer Walsh. The timing was so perfectly ironic that I almost laughed, but I managed to maintain composure as I glanced at the caller ID. I should probably take this, I said to David. It's a client call. Of course, David replied, though he made no move to leave the apartment. I'll just review these contract details while you handle your business. I answered the phone with my standard professional greeting, acutely aware that David was sitting a few feet away and could potentially overhear details that might complicate my carefully maintained cover story. Marcus, we need to discuss the Morrison Industries expansion proposal, Jennifer said without preamble. They're requesting additional services that could add significant revenue, but the timeline is aggressive and will need your approval for the resource allocation.
Jennifer's reference to needing my approval for major business decisions was exactly the kind of detail that could expose my identity as Summit Tech Solutions owner if David overheard and processed the implications. I glanced nervously at my brother, who appeared to be absorbed in reading his employment contract. "I'm not in a position to discuss details right now," I said carefully, hoping Jennifer would understand the need for discretion without requiring explicit explanation. "Are you with someone?" Jennifer asked, her tone shifting to reflect understanding of potential confidentiality concerns. "Yes, exactly," I replied, relieved that she had grasped the situation. "Should I call back later, or can you come to the office this afternoon?" Jennifer asked. "The Morrison team wants a response by end of business today." The Morrison Industries expansion that Jennifer was referencing represented a potential $8 million addition to our existing contract, but it would require substantial resource commitments and strategic planning that demanded my direct involvement as the company owner. "I can be there in an hour," I said, ending the call quickly before any additional details could be discussed within David's hearing range. "Important client?" David asked, looking up from his contract documents with polite interest. "Just some technical specifications that need clarification," I replied, hoping the vague explanation would satisfy his curiosity without generating additional questions. "You know, Marcus," David said thoughtfully, "conversations like that are exactly why I think you'd thrive at Summit Tech Solutions. You clearly understand technical complexities and client communication. Jennifer Walsh would be impressed by your professionalism." The idea that Jennifer Walsh would be impressed by my professionalism was amusing, considering that she reported directly to me and was currently requesting my approval for major business decisions. David's assessment of my capabilities was accurate, but his understanding of my professional context was completely inverted. "I should probably head out to handle this client situation," I said, hoping to conclude our conversation before additional complications could arise. "Of course," David replied, gathering his contract documents, "but Marcus, please think seriously about the Summit Tech Solutions opportunity. I genuinely believe it could be exactly what you need to take your career to the next level." His earnest concern for my professional development was touching, even as the fundamental irony of his offer became increasingly difficult to bear. David was volunteering to help me access opportunities at the company I owned, motivated by his perception that I was struggling while he flourished. "I'll definitely consider it," I promised, which was technically true, though not in the way David imagined. After David left, I sat in my loft for several minutes processing the extraordinary conversation we had just concluded. My brother had offered to help me secure employment at my own company while enthusiastically praising my business acumen without realizing he was describing my achievements. The layers of irony and misunderstanding had reached proportions that seemed almost scripted for dramatic effect. I drove to Summit Tech Solutions headquarters with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, knowing that my meeting with Jennifer Walsh about the Morrison Industries expansion would require careful attention to maintaining professional boundaries, while my personal life was becoming increasingly complicated by family relationships. Jennifer was waiting in the conference room when I arrived, surrounded by financial projections and strategic planning documents that represented weeks of analysis and preparation. The Morrison Industries expansion opportunity was indeed substantial, but it would require significant investments in personnel and technology that demanded careful consideration. "The timeline is aggressive," Jennifer explained as we reviewed the proposal details. "Morrison wants implementation to begin within 60 days, which means we'll need to hire additional developers and potentially lease expanded office space." The expansion timeline Jennifer was describing was challenging, but achievable if we committed adequate resources and managed the project carefully. Morrison Industries had been one of our most valuable clients, and their request for expanded services represented both validation of our capabilities and opportunity for substantial revenue growth. "What's your assessment of our capacity to deliver on these commitments?" I asked, reviewing the technical specifications and resource requirements. "We can do it," Jennifer replied confidently, "but it will require David's team to coordinate closely with development and project management. His client relationship skills will be crucial for managing Morrison's expectations and ensuring smooth implementation." The prospect of David playing a central role in managing our largest client expansion added another layer of complexity to my already complicated situation. His success would be essential for the project's success, but his involvement would also increase his visibility within the organization and potential exposure to information that could compromise my anonymity. Approve the expansion, I decided after reviewing all relevant factors. But let's implement additional confidentiality protocols for this project to protect sensitive client and company information. Jennifer nodded in understanding, though I suspected she didn't fully grasp my specific concerns about information security in relation to my family relationships. As I drove home from Summit Tech Solutions headquarters, I reflected on the increasingly unsustainable nature of my elaborate deception. David's promotion to Director of Business Development would give him access to strategic information and executive relationships that made continued secrecy about my identity increasingly risky. His success within the organization was accelerating in ways that would inevitably lead to situations where maintaining my anonymity would become practically impossible. That evening, I called Tyler Rodriguez to discuss the day's developments and seek perspective on my increasingly complex situation. David offered to get you a job at your own company, Tyler said after I had recounted the afternoon's conversation. Marcus, this has officially moved beyond ironic into the realm of the completely absurd. I know, I admitted, but his offer was genuine. He really wants to help me succeed professionally. That's not the point, Tyler replied firmly. The point is that you've created a situation where your own brother is trying to help you access opportunities you already control. This level of deception is unsustainable and potentially harmful to everyone involved. Tyler's assessment was accurate, but I remained uncertain about how to resolve the situation without causing significant damage to family relationships and professional dynamics that had taken years to establish. What happens when David starts asking more detailed questions about company ownership? Tyler asked, what happens when he gains enough seniority to interact directly with Jennifer Walsh about strategic decisions? What happens when someone accidentally reveals information that exposes your identity? These were all valid concerns that I had been avoiding confronting directly. David's advancement within Summit Tech Solutions was creating increasing possibilities for accidental discovery or inadvertent revelation that could expose my elaborate deception in ways that would shock and potentially devastate family relationships. I think it's time to tell them the truth, Tyler said after a long pause. Before circumstances force the revelation in ways that make you look deliberately deceptive rather than privately successful. The idea of voluntarily revealing my identity as Summit Tech Solutions owner was both terrifying and appealing. The weight of maintaining the deception had become increasingly burdensome, and the complications were multiplying in ways that made continued secrecy practically untenable. How do I explain 3 years of lies? I asked, how do I tell my family that I've been listening to them celebrate David's success at my company while they worried about my career struggles? You tell them the truth, Tyler replied simply. That you built something extraordinary and wanted to see if they could recognize your achievements without the filter of family expectations and comparisons. That weekend, I made the decision that would change everything. I called my parents and asked them to organize a family dinner for the following Sunday, explaining that I had important news to share. The anticipation in my mother's voice suggested she hoped I was finally ready to announce some conventional milestone: marriage, engagement, or traditional career advancement. Sunday arrived with perfect spring weather, and I drove to my parents' house carrying a folder of documents that would forever alter my family's understanding of our relationships and dynamics. David and Sarah were already there when I arrived, along with the usual collection of extended family members who gathered for significant announcements. Marcus has something important to share with all of us, my mother announced as we gathered in the living room after dinner. We're so excited to hear your news. I looked around the room at faces filled with expectation and affection, realizing that this moment would divide our family history into before and after periods that could never be reconciled or undone. I need to tell you all something that I should have shared years ago. I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. It's about my work and David's career at Summit Tech Solutions. David's expression shifted from curiosity to confusion as he processed the unexpected connection between my announcement and his professional success. 3 years ago, I founded a software development company called Summit Tech Solutions, I continued, watching as comprehension slowly dawned across their faces. I am the owner and founder of the company where David works. The silence that followed was absolute and profound. David's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, realization, and something that might have been anger or hurt. My parents stared at me as though I had announced that I was secretly an alien or a time traveler. That's impossible, David said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Summit Tech Solutions is a major company. You're a freelance web designer. No, I replied gently. I'm the founder and owner of Summit Tech Solutions. Jennifer Walsh reports to me. Your promotion, your salary, your stock options, all of it comes from the company I built. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth as she processed the implications. My parents looked between David and me as though trying to solve a puzzle that had too many missing pieces.
Every achievement you've celebrated, every promotion you've earned, every opportunity you've received, it's all been within the company I created, I continued. David, your success is real and deserved, but it's happening at my business. My father was the first to find his voice. Why would you keep this secret? Why would you let us think you were struggling while David succeeded? Because I wanted to see if you could recognize my achievements without the filter of family expectations, I answered honestly. Because I was tired of being compared to David and found inferior. Because I wanted to build something extraordinary, and see if it would change how you saw me. David stood up abruptly, his face flushed with emotion. You've been watching me celebrate my career while knowing it was your company. You've been listening to our family praise my success while hiding that you created the opportunities. Yes, I admitted. And David, you genuinely deserve every bit of recognition you've received. Your performance has been exceptional, and your advancement has been based entirely on merit. But it's been merit within a company you own, David replied, his voice rising with frustration. How can I know whether my success is real or whether it's just my brother taking care of me? Because Jennifer Walsh makes all personnel decisions based on performance metrics and business needs, I explained. Because your clients specifically request to work with you. Because your contributions have generated millions of dollars in revenue. The conversation continued for hours, with emotions ranging from shock to anger to gradual understanding. My parents struggled to process 3 years of elaborate deception, while David grappled with questions about the authenticity of his professional achievements. Eventually, as the initial shock subsided, a different kind of conversation began to emerge. My family started to understand the magnitude of what I had accomplished and the reasons behind my decision to keep it secret. David began to appreciate that his success within Summit Tech Solutions was genuine and that his career prospects remained extraordinary regardless of ownership structure. I need time to process this, David said as the evening concluded. But Marcus, what you've built is incredible. I just wish you had trusted us enough to share it honestly. I wish I had too, I replied. But I needed to prove something to myself first. 6 months later, David continues to excel as Director of Business Development at Summit Tech Solutions, now with full knowledge of my role as owner and founder. Our relationship has evolved from simple brotherhood into a complex partnership that combines family bonds with professional collaboration. He has chosen to remain with the company, finding fulfillment in contributing to an organization that reflects values and vision he genuinely supports. My parents have gradually adjusted to understanding their eldest son as a successful entrepreneur rather than a struggling freelancer. The shift in perception has been profound, affecting not only how they see my achievements, but also how they understand family dynamics and the assumptions they had maintained for decades. The revelation changed everything, but perhaps not in the ways I had expected. Instead of vindication or dramatic reversal of family roles, I found something more valuable: authentic relationships based on truth rather than carefully maintained deceptions. David's success remains real and impressive, and my achievements are finally visible and acknowledged. Sometimes the most powerful revelations come not from external validation but from the courage to stop hiding who we really are. In the end, the truth was more liberating than any elaborate deception could ever be. The morning after my revelation about owning Summit Tech Solutions, I woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from various family members, each processing the bombshell I had dropped at Sunday dinner in their own unique way. My phone had been buzzing continuously since I left my parents' house the night before, but I had deliberately ignored it, needing time to decompress from the most emotionally intense family gathering of my adult life. The first message I read was from Sarah, sent at 2 in the morning with the raw honesty that only shock could produce. Marcus, I can't sleep. David has been pacing around our apartment for hours trying to wrap his head around this. Part of him is proud of you, part of him is angry about the deception, and part of him is questioning everything he thought he knew about his own abilities. This is going to take time to process, but what you built is absolutely incredible. I had no idea. Her message captured the emotional complexity that I knew would define the coming weeks or months as my family adjusted to a completely altered understanding of our relationships and dynamics. The truth had created as many questions as it had answered, and everyone was struggling to reconcile years of assumptions with a reality that was fundamentally different from what they had believed. David's messages were more scattered and emotional, clearly written as thoughts occurred to him throughout a sleepless night. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" Was followed 2 hours later by the Morrison Industries deal. "I closed last month. Was that your negotiation or mine? And then how many times did you sit there listening to us talk about how you needed to get your life together while you were literally employing me?" Each question reflected a different aspect of his psychological processing, as he worked through the implications of learning that his professional success had occurred within a company owned by the brother our family had consistently treated as underachieving. The complexity of his emotions was evident in the progression of his messages, cycling through hurt, confusion, pride, and anger in seemingly random patterns. My mother's texts were characteristically focused on family harmony and damage control. "Sweetheart, I've been awake all night thinking about everything. Your father and I need to talk with you about how we can move forward as a family. We're proud of what you've accomplished, but we're also hurt that you felt you couldn't share this with us. Can you come over this evening?" The invitation to come over for family discussion carried undertones of the formal family meetings that had occurred throughout my childhood whenever serious issues needed to be addressed. These gatherings typically involved my parents presenting unified positions on important matters, while my brother and I listened and responded to their concerns. My father's single message was brief but loaded with meaning. "Son, I owe you an apology that's 30 years overdue." I spent the morning in my downtown loft, drinking coffee and staring out at the Austin skyline while contemplating the magnitude of what had changed overnight. The secret that had defined my adult life and shaped every family interaction for the past 3 years was finally in the open, creating possibilities for authentic relationships while also forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about family dynamics and personal assumptions. Around noon, Tyler Rodriguez called with the directness that had characterized our friendship since college. "So I'm assuming last night went as well as expected, which is to say it was probably a complete disaster, but ultimately necessary." "That's a pretty accurate assessment," I replied, grateful for his straightforward perspective on what had been an emotionally overwhelming experience. "How's David handling it?" Tyler asked, cutting straight to what he knew was my primary concern. "He's processing," I said carefully. "Angry about the deception, proud of what I built, questioning whether his achievements are legitimate." Pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Tyler was quiet for a moment before responding. "His achievements are legitimate, Marcus. You might own the company, but you didn't manipulate his performance reviews or fabricate his client relationships. Jennifer Walsh isn't going to risk her professional reputation by promoting someone who doesn't deserve advancement." This was the argument I had been rehearsing in my mind since the previous evening, preparing to defend David's accomplishments against any suggestion that family favoritism had influenced his career trajectory. The evidence supported his genuine merit as an employee, but the emotional reality was more complicated than objective performance metrics could address. "The question now," Tyler continued, "is how you manage the transition from secret owner to acknowledged family member within the company structure. That's going to require some careful navigation." He was absolutely right. The revelation of my identity created practical complications that extended beyond family dynamics into professional relationships and organizational management. David's continued employment at Summit Tech Solutions would require clear boundaries and transparent policies to address potential conflicts of interest. I spent the afternoon reviewing company policies and consulting with our legal counsel about appropriate procedures for managing family employment relationships. Summit Tech Solutions had never faced this situation before, and I wanted to ensure that any decisions we made would protect both David's professional standing and the company's integrity. Jennifer Walsh called me around 3 o'clock, her voice carrying a mixture of professional concern and personal curiosity about the family revelation that David had apparently shared with her that morning. "David came to see me first thing this morning," Jennifer explained. "He was clearly shaken by learning about your identity, but he wanted to address any potential concerns about his position within the company. I have to say, Marcus, his primary worry was about maintaining the integrity of his role rather than leveraging family connections for additional advantages." Her assessment of David's character was reassuring but not surprising. Despite our family's complicated dynamics, David had always demonstrated genuine integrity in his personal and professional relationships. His concern about potential conflicts of interest reflected the same ethical standards that had made him successful within Summit Tech Solutions. "What's your recommendation for moving forward?" I asked, trusting Jennifer's judgment about organizational management and employee relations. I think David should continue in his current role with full transparency about the family relationship, Jennifer replied. His performance has been exceptional, his client relationships are strong, and removing him now would actually harm the company's interests. However, we should implement additional oversight procedures to ensure that any future advancement decisions are clearly documented and based on objective criteria. Her suggestion was practical and fair, acknowledging both David's legitimate contributions and the need for additional safeguards to address potential conflicts of interest. The approach would allow David to continue building his career while protecting the company from any appearance of impropriety. There's something else we should discuss, Jennifer continued. David asked me directly whether his promotion to Director of Business Development was influenced by your relationship. I told him honestly that the decision was based entirely on his performance and potential, but he seemed to need additional reassurance. The fact that David was questioning the legitimacy of his advancement was both understandable and painful. His self-doubt reflected years of family dynamics where his achievements had been celebrated while mine were minimized, creating a psychology where external validation was essential for confidence. Set up a meeting with David for tomorrow morning, I decided. I want to review his performance evaluations and client feedback with him directly, so he can see the objective evidence supporting his advancement. That evening I drove to my parents' house for the family discussion my mother had requested. The familiar suburban street looked exactly as it always had, but I felt like I was approaching a foreign country where all the customs and relationships had fundamentally changed overnight. My parents were waiting in the living room when I arrived, sitting together on the couch with the formal positioning they adopted for serious conversations. David and Sarah were also there, occupying chairs that placed them slightly apart from the generational authority structure that my parents typically maintained during family meetings. Marcus, my father began, his voice carrying a gravity I had rarely heard before. Your mother and I have spent considerable time today discussing everything that happened last night. We need to acknowledge some painful truths about how we've treated you over the years. The admission was unprecedented in our family history. My parents had never explicitly acknowledged favoritism or differential treatment, instead maintaining the fiction that any disparities in their responses to David's and my achievements were based on objective factors rather than emotional preferences. We realize that we've been celebrating David's success at your company, while simultaneously expressing disappointment in your career choices. My mother continued, her voice trembling slightly. The irony is almost too painful to bear. Sarah reached over to squeeze David's hand as he struggled with his own emotional processing. I keep thinking about all the times we discussed how Marcus needed to get his act together professionally, while David was succeeding at the company Marcus built, she said quietly. It's like we were living in a completely alternate reality. The acknowledgement of our family's inverted understanding of success and achievement was both validating and deeply sad. For 3 years I had listened to conversations that praised David's accomplishments while lamenting my apparent lack of direction, all while knowing that his success was occurring within the business I had created. Why didn't you tell us? David asked, his voice carrying hurt rather than anger. Why did you let us celebrate my achievements while believing you were struggling? The question went to the heart of my motivations for maintaining the elaborate deception. Because I wanted to see if you could recognize my worth without it being attached to traditional markers of success, I replied honestly. Because I was tired of being compared to you and found lacking. Because I needed to prove to myself that I could build something extraordinary. But we could have been proud of you, my mother protested. We could have celebrated your success instead of worrying about your future. Could you? I asked gently. Based on our family's history, would you have really celebrated my achievements, or would you have found ways to minimize them or redirect attention back to David? The question hung in the air as my parents confronted the uncomfortable possibility that their patterns of favoritism might have continued even if they had known about Summit Tech Solutions from the beginning. You're right, my father admitted after a long pause. We probably would have found ways to make it about David somehow. We've been doing that your entire life without realizing it. The conversation continued for nearly 3 hours, covering decades of family dynamics and missed opportunities for authentic connection. My parents gradually acknowledged patterns of behavior that had made me feel invisible while David received disproportionate attention and validation. I want you to know that your success at Summit Tech Solutions has nothing to do with family connections, I told David directly. Every promotion, every opportunity, every client relationship you've built has been based on your own merit and abilities. But how can I be sure?
David asked, voicing the insecurity that had been evident in his messages and conversations with Jennifer Walsh. How do I know that my achievements are real when they're happening within your company? Because Jennifer Walsh's professional reputation depends on making sound personnel decisions, I replied. Because your clients specifically request to work with you. Because the revenue you've generated for the company is measurable and substantial. I pulled out copies of David's performance evaluations and client feedback reports that I had brought specifically to address his concerns about the legitimacy of his achievements. The documentation showed consistently excellent ratings across all performance categories, with specific examples of initiatives he had led and problems he had solved. Look at these client testimonials, I said, spreading the documents across the coffee table. Morrison Industries specifically mentioned your communication skills and strategic thinking. The Henderson Group credited you with saving their project when it was falling behind schedule. These aren't family favors, David. This is recognition of genuine professional competence. As David reviewed the objective evidence of his performance, I could see his confidence beginning to return. The documentation validated what he had accomplished while providing assurance that family relationships hadn't distorted professional evaluations. The Morrison Industries expansion project that's starting next month, David said, looking up from the performance reviews. That's a $15 million contract. You're trusting me to manage that relationship because of my abilities, not because I'm your brother. I'm trusting you because you've proven you can handle complex client relationships and deliver results, I confirmed. Morrison Industries specifically requested continuity in account management because they're impressed with your work. Sarah had been quietly listening to our conversation, but now she spoke up with a question that surprised everyone. Marcus, what was it like listening to us talk about David's career while knowing you were his employer? That must have been incredibly difficult. Her question addressed the emotional impact of my deception in ways that others had focused on the practical implications. It was surreal, I admitted. Sometimes I felt proud watching David succeed at something I had built. Sometimes I felt frustrated listening to family conversations that praised his achievements while dismissing my choices. Mostly it was just lonely, knowing this huge part of my life that I couldn't share. We made you feel like you had to hide your success from your own family, my mother said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. That's a terrible failure on our part. The conversation gradually shifted from confronting past patterns to discussing how our family relationships might evolve going forward. The revelation of my identity as Summit Tech Solutions owner had created opportunities for more authentic connections, but it had also exposed years of dysfunction that couldn't be instantly resolved. I think we all need time to adjust to this new reality, David said thoughtfully. Marcus, I'm proud of what you've built, and I'm grateful for the opportunities you've created, even if they came in ways I didn't expect. But I also need to figure out how to continue my career, knowing that my employer is my brother. His concern was legitimate and reflected the professional maturity he had developed during his time at Summit Tech Solutions. The family relationship added complexity to workplace dynamics that would require careful management to maintain appropriate boundaries. Would you prefer to transfer to a different department where we don't interact professionally? I asked, wanting to ensure that David felt comfortable with whatever arrangement we established. No, David replied immediately. I love what I'm doing and I'm good at it. But I want clear policies about how family relationships are managed within the company structure. I don't want special treatment, and I don't want other employees to question whether my advancement is based on merit. His request for transparent policies demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity that had made him successful within Summit Tech Solutions. David understood that maintaining professional credibility would require additional safeguards to address potential conflicts of interest. Over the following weeks, we implemented several organizational changes to address the family employment situation. David's performance evaluations would now include input from multiple supervisors and client feedback to ensure objective assessment. Any future promotions or compensation changes would require documentation of specific achievements and market comparisons. We also established a policy allowing David to transfer to other departments if he ever felt that family relationships were affecting his professional development. The changes satisfied David's concerns about maintaining professional integrity while providing transparency that protected both his reputation and the company's interests. Other employees were informed about our family relationship through a company-wide memo that emphasized our commitment to merit-based advancement and fair treatment for all staff members. 6 months after the revelation, our family dynamics had evolved in ways that surprised everyone involved. My parents had gradually adjusted their understanding of success and achievement, recognizing patterns of favoritism that had affected family relationships for decades. They now made deliberate efforts to acknowledge my accomplishments while continuing to support David's career development. David thrived in his role as Director of Business Development, successfully managing the Morrison Industries' expansion while developing new client relationships that exceeded revenue projections. His confidence in his professional abilities had returned stronger than before, supported by objective evidence of his contributions and clear policies that addressed potential conflicts of interest. Our relationship had evolved from simple brotherhood into a complex partnership that combined family bonds with professional collaboration. We learned to separate family discussions from business decisions while maintaining the mutual respect and affection that had always characterized our personal relationship. The most significant change was in my own emotional well-being. The burden of maintaining elaborate deception had been lifted, allowing me to engage authentically with family members who now understood and appreciated what I had accomplished. The validation I had sought through building Summit Tech Solutions was ultimately less important than the honest relationships that emerged once the truth was revealed. Sarah and David announced their engagement 3 months after the revelation, with plans for a wedding that would celebrate not only their relationship but also the family healing that had occurred through confronting difficult truths. The engagement party was held at Summit Tech Solutions headquarters, symbolizing the integration of personal and professional relationships that had once seemed impossible. During his engagement toast, David spoke about the importance of authenticity in both personal and professional relationships. Marcus taught me that success isn't just about what you achieve, he said, but about having the courage to be honest about who you are and what you've accomplished. My father's response to David's toast was perhaps the most meaningful moment of the entire experience. I want to publicly acknowledge that I failed to recognize my eldest son's extraordinary achievements for far too long, he said, his voice carrying emotion that silenced the room. Marcus built something remarkable, and our family is stronger because he finally trusted us enough to share his success. The acknowledgement from my father represented a fundamental shift in family dynamics that had seemed impossible just months earlier. His willingness to admit past failures and celebrate my achievements demonstrated growth that extended beyond simply learning about Summit Tech Solutions to encompass broader understanding of fairness and recognition. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that the elaborate deception I maintained for 3 years was ultimately less important than the authentic relationships that emerged once the truth was revealed. The family dynamics that had made me feel invisible were gradually replaced by more balanced interactions based on mutual respect and honest communication. David's success within Summit Tech Solutions continued to be impressive and legitimate, now with the added satisfaction of knowing that his achievements were occurring within a company that reflected values and vision he genuinely supported. His career trajectory remained excellent, with opportunities for advancement that were based entirely on his proven abilities and contributions. The revelation had transformed not only my family's understanding of my professional success but also their appreciation for the complexity of human achievement and the importance of recognizing individual contributions regardless of family expectations or comparisons. Summit Tech Solutions continued to grow and prosper, benefiting from the leadership team that included both Jennifer Walsh's executive expertise and David's client relationship excellence. The company culture I had worked to establish was strengthened by the addition of transparent policies that addressed family employment while maintaining our commitment to merit-based advancement. Sometimes the most powerful transformations come not from external validation but from the courage to stop hiding who we really are and what we've accomplished. The truth, while initially disruptive, ultimately proved more valuable than any elaborate deception could ever be. The story of Easter dinner, when my family celebrated my brother's promotion at the company I secretly owned, became a turning point that led to deeper understanding, authentic relationships, and mutual respect based on honest recognition of each person's unique contributions and achievements. In the end, both David and I found something more valuable than individual success, a family that finally saw and appreciated each of us for who we really are, rather than who they expected us to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.